in our continent. Research tells us that some of the African member states are spending up to 50% of their GDP per year in response to climate-induced disasters. The economic losses resulting from climate change stand at more than 5% of the annual GDP for the continent. The bottom line is that the cost of climate change in Africa is too high for us. We know for sure that crying for the promised resources by the developed countries' parties has not yielded tangible results, and even the $100 billion that you promised during the during the Paris Agreement, COP21, up to now, we haven't seen anything. We haven't seen anything. That was the pledge in 2009 to be accessible from 2022. We are in 2023. We haven't seen anything. Please, partners, come and honor your pledge. Has not been reached to Africa. This is despite being their obligation due to their historic responsibility for climate change in line with the Convention and the Paris Agreement. We also know that the cost of addressing climate change is also skyrocketing. For example, the revise of our NDCs for Africa will require an estimated $3 trillion of investment, US dollar investment, to implement, in addition to all the climate action, including NAPs. Africa has refused to wait and die due to climate change. We shall continue to pursue them to honor their obligation, but at the same time, we shall proceed with our own initiatives aimed at building resilience in Africa. I must confess that at the African Union Commission, we are enjoying support for some of our development partners, and so are some of the member states. However, Africa needs to move from a donor-recipient relationship to that built around investment, as that it is the pathway to reaping development aspiration of our continent, the Africa we all want. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the primary goal of this summit is to propel our collective efforts on climate change and sustainable development forward. The fundamental driver of success for African green transition will be the availability of resources for investment, and these must be accompanied by the strengthening of the ability of the African countries to mobilize their own resources, their own domestic resources. And I believe in Africa we can do it. We have the resources. Let us start allocating the resources on the environmental agenda when we are doing our national budget. I believe that we have this capacity. So the fundamental driver of this success, as I say, for African green transition will be the availability of resources for investment, and those must be accompanied by strengthening of the ability of the African country to mobilize our own resources, build on the foundation of solid and inclusive economic growth. As a continent, previous growth models have been predicated largely on the sheep production and export of African raw material with a minimal value addition. We have to start adding value and create jobs for our youth and our women. A continuation of this trajectory will undoubtedly reinforce Africa's vulnerability. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the African continent remains a key player in charting the way forward towards a low-carbon future, despite being the least contributor and yet highly vulnerable to the impact of climate change. However, our strength lies in our unity and the fact that we are a continent that is vibrant, fast-growing, useful, young population, energy, and diversity. Our solution for African climate change are rooted in large-scale investment in climate resilience centered on energy access to drive sustainable industrialization. This represents one of the fastest drivers for poverty reduction, while also fundamentally changing the nature of Africa's economic model with large-scale investment in a sustainable value chain. To this end, we continue to put policy framework in place to support the implementation of climate action. Such frameworks include the African Union Climate Change and Resilience Development Strategy and Action Plan. This was adopted by our head of state. We are not here to invent the wheel. The wheel exists. If you want to partner with us, this is what our head of state adopted, and I invite partners to really align any investment in Africa with these important strategic action on climate change. We didn't have it, but we support of some partners, even the EU, we were able to elaborate and approve it. So I call upon all the partners and our member states to align on this so that we are not trying to multiplicate or duplicate what already exists in the continent.